The sterile hum of fluorescent lights buzzed overhead in the emergency room of Mercy General Hospital, casting harsh shadows on the tiled floor. 8-year-old Isabel Ramirez lay small and fragile on the gurney, her chest rising and falling in shallow, labored breaths. Tubes snaked from her arms to machines that beeped with relentless urgency, each tone a countdown. The doctors had been clear. Internal bleeding from the car accident had ravaged her tiny body, and she needed a rare blood type, AB negative, immediately. Without it, she had maybe an hour. Her mother, Elena, clutched the girl's hand, tears carving paths down her face, whispering prayers in Spanish that echoed off the walls like fragile echoes in a storm. Outside, the city pulsed with indifferent chaos. Rain-slicked streets reflected the neon glow of billboards, and horns blared in the gridlock of rush hour. The donor, a matching volunteer named Marcus Hale, was trapped 15 miles away, his old pickup stalled in a sea of taillights on the interstate. He'd gotten the frantic call from the hospital 20 minutes ago, but the highway was a snarl of accidents and construction. Nothing was moving. Elena's phone buzzed with updates from the blood bank. Time slipping away, seconds bleeding into minutes. Isabel's eyelids fluttered, her skin paling to the color of ash. In a dimly lit garage on the outskirts of town, Victor Lang wiped grease from his hands on a rag, the scent of oil and leather thick in the air. At 50, he was a man carved by time and road, broad shoulders etched with faded tattoos from his days in the military, a jagged scar running down his jaw from a long-ago crash that took his brother's life. Victor led the Iron Vipers, a motorcycle club, not of outlaws, but of survivors, ex-vets, mechanics, fathers who'd lost too much. They gathered not for thrills, but for the quiet code of loyalty that bound them tighter than blood. Tonight, Victor had been nursing a beer, staring at the wall where an old photo hung, him and his brother, arms slung around each other on their Harleys, promising to always have each other's backs. That promise had shattered years ago, leaving Victor hollow, riding endless miles to outrun the ghosts. His phone shattered the silence, the screen lighting up with an unknown number. He answered, voice gravelly from years of dust and wind. Lang. Mr. Lang, this is Dr. Harlan from Mercy General. We need your help. It's an emergency. The doctor's words tumbled out. The girl, the blood, the donor stuck. Victor's grip tightened on the phone. AB negative, his own type, rare as a desert bloom. But it wasn't just that. Elena Ramirez, her name hit him like a punch. He'd known her husband Thomas from the service. Thomas had saved Victor's life in a firefight overseas, extracting a promise in the foxhole. If anything happens to me, look after Elena and the kids. Thomas died a year later in a stateside accident, and Victor had drifted, burying the vow under layers of regret. Now, here it was, clawing back. Victor's jaw set. How far is the donor? 15 miles, but traffic's locked. We've called ambulances, cops. Nothing's budging. He hung up, heart pounding like a V-twin engine. Stepping outside, the night air carried the faint rumble of distant thunder. He fired up his black Indian chief, the beast roaring to life with a deep, throaty growl that vibrated through his bones. The headlights cut through the gloom as he peeled out, tires spitting gravel. Over the club radio, his voice crackled to the network of riders scattered across the county. Vipers, this is Lang. We got a little girl fighting for her life. Needs blood, donors pinned down. We're clearing the path. All in. The response was immediate. A chorus of affirmatives, engines igniting like fireworks in the dark. Within minutes, the first bikes converged at the garage. Chrome gleaming under street lamps, leathers creaking as men and women in their 40s and 50s mounted up. There was Jax, the burly welder who'd lost his son to illness and now welded hope into every ride. Beside him, Maria, a nurse with ink-black hair and a tattoo of wings on her wrist, honoring her fallen squadmate. 200 strong, they weren't a gang. They were a promise kept, a family forged in fire. Victor led the convoy, his bike at the front, the line snaking like a steel serpent through the suburbs. They hit the interstate ramp at full throttle, the pack swelling as more joined from side roads, headlights multiplying like stars falling to earth. The rain had eased, leaving the asphalt slick and shining, puddles mirroring the red tail lights ahead. Horns wailed in protest as the bikers surged onto the highway, a wall of rumbling thunder that drowned out the city's din. Victor raised a gloved fist, signaling the formation. They didn't block with aggression. They blocked with purpose, fanning out across lanes in a disciplined phalanx, engines idling low but ominous, creating a human corridor through the chaos. Drivers gawked from their cars, phones raised, capturing the spectacle. A state trooper's cruiser appeared in the rear view, lights flashing blue and red. Victor pulled over slightly, waving the officer forward. The trooper, a grizzled man named Reyes, rolled down his window, face stern under the brim of his hat. "What the hell is this? Move it or you're all ticketed." Victor killed his engine, the sudden silence heavy. He leaned in, rain dripping from his beard. "Trooper, there's a kid, 8 years old, dying in Mercy General. Donor can't get through. We're not causing trouble. We're making a way. You gonna stop us from saving her?" Reyes hesitated, eyes flicking to the sea of determined faces behind Victor. He'd heard stories of the Vipers, quiet guardians, not troublemakers. The radio in his dash crackled with dispatch. Hospital confirming the emergency, pleading for clearance. Reyes sighed, rubbing his neck. "All right, but keep it clean. I'll escort." The trooper flipped on his siren, not to stop them, but to part the sea. The bikers reformed, engines revving in unison, a symphony of power and restraint. They rolled forward slowly, weaving through stalled vehicles, gesturing drivers aside with nods and waves. A trucker yielded his lane. A minivan pulled over with a thumbs up. The convoy became a river of steel, carving a path where none existed. The scent of exhaust mingling with wet earth. Miles blurred. 10, 8, 5. Victor's mind raced ahead to the hospital, to Elena's face, to the promise he'd let gather dust. Isabel's life hung by a thread, but in this moment, with the wind whipping at his jacket and the brotherhood at his back, Victor felt the weight lift. This wasn't just a ride, it was redemption's roar, a vow reborn on the open road. The donor's truck appeared in the distance, inching forward, and Victor gunned his throttle, closing the gap. Time was the enemy, but loyalty was the weapon. As they neared the city limits, the hospital's lights pierced the horizon like a beacon. Marcus Hale spotted the bikers ahead, his face breaking into relief amid the frustration. He floored it when the path cleared, the trooper's cruiser leading the charge. Victor glanced at his watch, 40 minutes gone, 20 left. The engines thrummed louder, a heartbeat against the clock, carrying hope on 2 wheels. For Isabel, for Thomas, for the scars that no longer defined him. This ride would be the promise that endured. The donor's truck lumbered into view, its faded blue paint streaked with rain, headlights cutting feeble beams through the lingering mist. Marcus Hale gripped the wheel, knuckles white, sweat beading on his forehead despite the chill. He'd been a regular blood donor for years, ever since his own scare with a factory accident that nearly cost him his arm. But nothing had prepared him for this. The call from the hospital had come like a thunderclap, a little girl matching his rare AB negative, slipping away by the minute. Now, with the highway finally parting before him, he saw the impossible, a river of motorcycles stretching back like a living chain, their engines a low, insistent growl that vibrated through the asphalt. Victor Lang rode point, his Indian chief slicing the air with precision, the wind tugging at his salt and pepper hair beneath the helmet. Flashes of memory assaulted him with every mile. Tomas Ramirez's grin in the desert sun, the two of them sharing smokes after a patrol, Tomas clapping his shoulder with that unbreakable trust. "We're brothers now, Vic, blood or not." The promise had faded like old ink, buried under Victor's endless rides to forget the explosion that claimed his own sibling. But tonight, it surged back, raw and demanding. Elena's voice on the phone earlier, broken, pleading, had cracked the shell he'd built. For Isabel, he told himself, but deeper, it was for the man who'd pulled him from the brink. Behind him, the Iron Vipers held formation, a tapestry of weathered faces and scarred hands united in silent vigil. Jax revved his chopper lightly, the custom exhaust popping like distant gunfire, his mind on his lost boy, how one more minute might have changed everything. Maria rode flank, her nursing scrubs peeking from under her leather vest, eyes scanning the road for hazards. She'd seen too many codes called in the ER, too many families shattered. This ride wasn't glory, it was the quiet fury of those who'd pieced themselves back together. 200 bikes now, riders from every corner, mechanics closing shops early, vets leaving bar stools, a schoolteacher who'd traded her sedan for a Softail after her divorce. They weren't blocking for show, they were a lifeline. Engines humming in harmony as they funneled Marcus forward. The trooper's cruiser surged ahead, sirens whooping in short bursts to urge stragglers aside. Reyes glanced in his mirror, the convoy a mesmerizing sight, leathers gleaming wet, patches sewn with symbols of forgotten battles, eagles, crosses, faded unit insignias. He'd pulled over Vipers before for noise complaints, but this was different. Dispatch kept buzzing his earpiece, hospital updates, Isabel's vitals dipping, the OR prepped but waiting. He keyed the mic. All units, stand down on the interstate. Priority escort in progress. Child medical emergency. Static crackled back, a mix of confusion and compliance. Reyes accelerated, carving the final stretch, the hospital's silhouette rising against the sodium-lit sky. Inside Mercy General, the clock on the wall ticked mercilessly, its hands a blur to Elena Ramirez. She stroked Isabel's fevered brow, the girl's dark curls matted with sweat, her breaths coming in ragged whispers. The accident replayed in Elena's mind, the screech of tires on wet pavement, the minivan spinning out as a truck veered too close. Tomas gone 2 years now, and here she was facing the void again. "Stay with me, mija," she murmured, her voice thick with unshed sobs. Dr. Harlan paced nearby, stethoscope dangling like a noose, his face etched with the weight of impossible odds. "The bikers are en route with the donor," he said, more to fill the silence than reassure. Eleanor nodded, clutching a rosary, the beads digging into her palm. Faith had carried her this far. Now it clung by threads. On the highway, tension coiled like a spring. A semi-truck ahead hesitated, its driver blinking at the approaching wall of chrome. Victor signaled sharply, 2 fingers extended, and Jax pulled alongside, bellowing over the din, "Kids dying! Let us through!" The trucker nodded, hauling his rig to the shoulder with a hiss of brakes, tires groaning on gravel. The convoy flowed past, seamless, the air thick with the tang of hot rubber and exhaust. Marcus accelerated, his truck bouncing as it hit smoother lanes, the bikers parting like a curtain. He caught Victor's eye in the side mirror, a nod of gratitude passing between them, unspoken but ironclad. 5 miles out, the skyline sharpened, the hospital's emergency entrance a glowing more. Victor's radio buzzed, Maria's voice, calm but edged. "Ambulance inbound from the rear. Clear the merge," he acknowledged, twisting the throttle to widen the gap. The pack adjusted instinctively, years of group rides honing their rhythm. A young rider, barely 30, named Rico, fresh from the service, still carrying the ghosts of deployments, felt his pulse sink with the engine's throb. This was why he joined the Vipers. Not the road's freedom, but the pull of purpose, the chance to be the shield someone else needed. The final mile unfolded in a blur of lights and shadows. Reyes peeled off at the exit, radioing ahead to clear the lot. Marcus's truck barreled toward the ramp, the bikers fanning out to block cross-traffic, their presence a thunderous barrier. Horns blared from side streets, but no one challenged the tide. Victor dismounted first, boots hitting pavement with a solid thud, as medics swarmed the truck. Marcus jumped down, rolling up his sleeve without a word, the phlebotomist already waiting with the kit. "Straight to the OR," Victor barked, his voice cutting through the chaos. The donor nodded, eyes wide at the sea of supporters, strangers who'd become saviors in the span of an hour. Elena burst from the doors as the gurney wheeled Marcus in, her face a mask of desperate hope. She locked eyes with Victor across the lot, recognition dawning. "You, Tomas's friend." He removed his helmet, rain dripping from the brim, and stepped forward, promised him I'd look out, not too late to keep it. The words hung heavy, a bridge over years of silence. Inside, machines whirred to life, blood flowing from vein to vein, Isabel's monitors steadying beep by beep. The bikers lingered in the lot, engines off now, a quiet vigil under the fluorescence. Jax lit a cigarette, exhaling smoke that curled like prayers. Maria checked her phone, vitals improving. Victor leaned against his bike, the scar on his jaw catching the light, feeling the old hollow fill with something solid. 45 minutes in, 15 spared. The ride had cleaved the night, proving that in a world of locked doors and red tape, loyalty could roar louder than any storm. As the first hints of dawn streaked the horizon, painting the chrome in gold, the Vipers knew this wasn't the end. Isabel's fight continued, but their bond, forged in thunder and rain, had just begun to echo. And now, I invite you to leave in the comments where you're watching from and the exact hour you heard this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel and at what moments they reach you. The first rays of dawn filtered through the blinds of Isabel's recovery room, casting elongated shadows across the monitors that now beeped with a steadier rhythm. The sterile scent of antiseptic mingled with the faint, comforting aroma of fresh coffee from the nurse's station down the hall. Elena sat vigil by her daughter's bedside, her fingers interlaced with Isabel's small hand, the girl's color returning in subtle pinks to her cheeks. The transfusion had worked, a miracle stitched from urgency and unlikely alliance. But Dr. Harlan's warnings lingered like fog. Complications could still arise, infection or rejection, the body's fragile truce with the foreign life force now coursing through her veins. Elena's eyes, red-rimmed from the endless night, lifted to the window where the Iron Viper's bikes lined the parking lot like silent sentinels, chrome catching the light in glints of promise fulfilled. Victor Lang stood outside, leaning against the cool brick wall of the hospital, a paper cup of lukewarm coffee steaming in his grip. The adrenaline from the ride had ebbed, leaving a bone-deep weariness that settled into his joints like old rust. At 50, he'd chased enough ghosts on the open road to know this feeling, the hollow after the roar when the weight of what you'd carried pressed down anew. Thomas's face flickered in his mind again, that foxhole pact sealed with a nod and a shared flask under starless skies. Family's what you fight for, Vic, not the ones handed to you. Victor had failed it once, drifting after the war, after his brother's crash, letting the miles swallow the guilt. But last night's convoy, 200 souls converging like a storm, had cracked the armor. He sipped the coffee, bitter on his tongue, and watched as Jax approached, his welder's hands stuffed in his pockets, the lines around his eyes deeper in the morning light. "She's stable," Jax said, voice low and gravelly, clapping Victor on the shoulder. The big man had a way of filling space, his presence a bulwark built from years of loss, his son gone too soon to a fever that no ride could outrun. Heard from Maria inside, "Kid's a fighter." Victor nodded, but his gaze drifted to the lot where riders milled about, sharing smokes and quiet words. Not everyone had gone home. A core group lingered, unwilling to sever the thread of connection woven in the rain-slicked hours. Maria emerged from the sliding doors then, her leather vest slung over one arm, scrubs rumpled from the night's vigil. She'd stayed through the handoff, monitoring the flow of blood as if it were her own vow at stake. "Elena's asking for you," she told Victor, her dark eyes steady. "Says it's time." Inside, the hallway hummed with subdued activity, nurses wheeling carts, a janitor mopping faint traces of the night's chaos. Victor's boots echoed softly on the linoleum, each step pulling him toward a reckoning he'd postponed for years. Elena looked up as he entered the room, her posture straightening, a flicker of recognition softening the exhaustion in her features. Isabel slept peacefully now, an IV drip whispering sustenance into her arm, the machines a chorus of fragile hope. "Victor," Elena said, her voice a threadbare whisper, rising to meet him halfway. She was smaller than he remembered, worn by widowhood and worry, but the fire in her eyes echoed Thomas's unyielding spirit. "You came. After all this time." He removed his hat, holding it against his chest like a shield lowered. "Should have come sooner. Tomas. He made me promise. I let the road take me instead." The words hung in the air, heavy with the dust of unspoken regrets. Elena's hand trembled as she reached out, not in anger, but in quiet absolution. "He'd be proud. What you did last night, it wasn't just for Isabel. It was for all of us." Outside, through the glass, the bikers began to stir. engines coughing to life in sporadic bursts, the low rumble vibrating through the walls like a distant heartbeat. Word had spread through the county, texts, calls, whispers in diners and garages, turning the Viper's ride into legend before the sun crested fully. Reporters hovered at the lot's edge, cameras poised, but the riders ignored them, their focus inward on the bond reforged. As Victor sat beside the bed, Eleanor shared fragments of the years he'd missed. Isabel's first bike ride on training wheels, her laughter echoing Thomas's, the quiet nights when grief clawed too deep. He listened, the scar on his jaw itching under the fluorescent glow, a reminder of his own fractures. The brother lost in that desert skid, twisted metal and silence, had left Victor vowing never to lead again, to ride solo through the emptiness. But the Vipers had pulled him back, piece by piece, their loyalty a mirror to the one he'd owed Thomas. Now, with Isabel's chest rising evenly, Victor felt the promise settle, not as burden, but as anchor. "We'll be here," he said finally, voice firm. "Not just today, the club, we're family now. For her, for you." The morning unfolded in layers of revelation. Down in the cafeteria, Rico, the young vet with eyes too old for his face, shared coffee with Reyes, the trooper who'd bent the rules in the nick of time. "Never seen anything like it," Reyes admitted, stirring sugar into his mug, the steam curling like unspoken questions. "You folks, you're not what the headlines say about clubs." Rico chuckled softly, the sound laced with the weariness of sand-swept memories. "We're just keeping promises, man, ones that outlast the badges and the miles." Outside, the convoy reformed loosely, not to ride away but to stand guard. Rotating shifts through the day, engines idling at intervals to signal their presence. A local mechanic arrived with toolkits, offering free tune-ups to hospital staff in quiet thanks. Maria coordinated with the blood bank, rallying donors from the club's network to replenish stocks. By midday, the sun burned high, baking the asphalt and turning the lot into a shimmering sea of metal. Isabel stirred, her eyelids fluttering open to the sight of her mother and the stranger with kind eyes. "Mama, the angels came?" Elena smiled through tears, brushing back the curls. "Something like that, mija. Friends on wheels." Victor stepped back, giving them space. But the moment etched into him, a redemption not thunderous but profound in its simplicity. The hospital buzzed with the spillover, staff whispering about the biker miracle, patients peering from windows at the unexpected guardians. Yet beneath the awe, tension simmered. Dr. Harlan pulled Victor aside in the corridor, his face grave under the harsh lights. "She's out of the woods for now, but the insurance, it's a mess. The accident reports tangled in red tape, and without Thomas's benefits fully processed." Victor's jaw tightened, the old fire kindling. Corruption in the system wasn't new, claims denied, families left adrift while suits profited. He'd seen it chew through vets after the service, promises of care dissolving into paperwork voids. "We'll handle it," he said, voice like grinding gears. "Vipers don't leave our own hanging." He radioed the club, the network humming to life. Lawyers from the ranks, a retired judge who'd ridden with them once, all mobilizing in the shadows of the day. This wasn't just blood saved, it was a stand against the indifferent machine, loyalty as the sharpest tool. As afternoon shadows lengthened, the riders gathered in a loose circle by the entrance, sharing stories over lukewarm sodas from the vending machine. Jax recounted his son's last ride, the wind in the boy's hair a memory that fueled his resolve. Maria spoke of squadmates lost to bureaucracy, their sacrifices buried in files. Victor listened, the circle closing around him, a family chosen in the crucible of crisis. Isabel's survival was the spark, but the true fire was this, honor enduring, promises weaving through the cracks of a cynical world. The engines revved once more, not in departure, but in affirmation, the sound rolling like thunder over the horizon, hinting at battles yet to come. For in saving one life, they'd ignited a legacy, one that no highway could contain. The afternoon sun hung heavy over Mercy General, turning the parking lot into a furnace of reflected heat off the rows of idling motorcycles. Victor Lang wiped sweat from his brow with the back of his glove, the leather warm and worn against his skin. The air carried the sharp tang of overheated engines mixed with the faint, acrid bite of hospital exhaust from the ambulance bay. Riders clustered in small groups, their leathers unzipped against the rising temperature, voices murmuring in low tones that blended with the distant hum of city traffic. What had started as a midnight rescue now simmered into a deeper fray, the bureaucratic snare tightening around Elena and Isabel, threatening to undo the fragile victory of the night. Inside the hospital's administrative wing, Victor paced the narrow corridor, his boots scuffing softly against the worn carpet. The walls, painted a sterile beige, were lined with faded posters touting patient rights and insurance helplines, their edges curling like forgotten promises. Dr. Harlan had pulled him aside earlier, his voice dropping to a confidential hush amid the shuffle of clipboards and ringing phones. The claim stalled, the doctor had explained, rubbing his temples as if warding off a headache born of too many battles lost to paperwork. The accident report cites contributory negligence on Thomas's old policy, some fine print about expired coverage. Without it, Elena's facing bills that could bury her. And Isabel's follow-up care, it's all tied up. Victor's fists clenched at his sides, the scar along his jaw pulling tight with the motion. He'd seen this beast before, in VA waiting rooms where vets like Thomas waited months for what was owed, only to be met with denials stamped in triplicate. The system, meant to protect, had teeth that gnawed at the vulnerable, corruption hiding in clauses and closed doors. Elena, he'd learned, had been fighting this shadow since Thomas's death, benefits frozen in appeals, a widow scraping by on night shifts at a diner, her dreams for Isabel's future chipped away one rejection at a time. Last night's ride had saved a life, but this was the war that lingered, testing the honor Victor had reclaimed on the highway. He pushed open the door to the waiting area where Eleanor sat, her shoulders hunched over a stack of forms, a pen hovering uncertainly. Isabel dozed in a nearby room, the monitor's soft beeps filtering through like a lullaby. Elena looked up, her eyes shadowed but fierce, the rosary still looped around her wrist like a talisman. "They say it's denied," she whispered, the words tasting of ash. "Thomas paid in every month. How can they?" Her voice cracked, the weight of isolation pressing down after years of solitary struggle. Victor knelt beside her, his voice steady as gravel under tires. "They won't get away with it. Not on my watch." He pulled out his phone, thumbing through contacts built over decades. The club's network a web of quiet allies. A paralegal named Lena who'd ridden with the Vipers after losing her brother to a similar tangle. A former claims adjuster turned whistleblower. Even old Reyes from the escort, whose badge carried sway in precinct backrooms. "Tomas pulled me from fire once, said promises were the only currency that mattered. We're cashing his in now." Word rippled through the club like exhaust trailing a pack ride. Jax lumbered in first, his massive frame filling the doorway. Toolbox in hand, not for engines this time, but for leverage. He'd called in favors from union contacts, digging into the insurer's underbelly, whispers of padded denials, executives golfing while families drowned. Maria followed, her nursing badge granting access to patient advocate channels, coordinating with hospital social workers to build a case file thick with medical necessity. Rico, the young vet, manned the lot, fielding arriving supporters, more bikes pulling up, engines growling to a halt, riders nodding in silent solidarity. 200 had cleared the road. Now that number swelled with purpose, a chorus of leathers and resolve, turning the hospital into a fortress of fealty. As the sun dipped toward evening, the administrative office became a battlefield of words. Victor led the charge, Lena at his side, her sharp eyes scanning documents under the desk lamp's glow. The claims rep, a slick-suited man named Carver, with a tie too tight for his neck, leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. "Policy lapsed 6 months before the accident," he droned, voice smooth as oil on water. "Regulations are clear, no exceptions." But Lena slid forward a folder, her tone cutting like a well-honed blade. "Clear or conveniently overlooked? We've got records of your company's pattern, denials spiking after mergers, families like Ramirez's funneled into appeals that never end." Carver's composure flickered, sweat beading at his collar as the room filled. Jax looming in the corner, Maria with her tablet of witness statements from the ride, even Reyes poking his head in with a friendly update on traffic cams that might show the accident's true cause. A swerving semi, not Thomas's fault. The air thickened with tension, the scent of stale coffee warring with the faint leather from the intruders. Victor locked eyes with Carver, his gaze unyielding, the weight of 200 backs given in the night underscoring every word. This isn't about rules, it's about right. A girl lives because we moved mountains. You gonna let paper bury that? Outside, the lot thrummed with life. Riders sharing thermoses of soup brought from home kitchens, stories exchanged in the golden light. Lost comrades kept oaths, the road's unforgiving lessons. One elder viper, a silver-haired mechanic named Hale, no relation to the donor, recounted a vow from Nam days, how it pulled him from despair. The circle tightened, bonds invisible but iron strong, a family chosen in the forge of necessity. Elena joined them briefly, stepping out for air, her hand brushing Victor's arm in quiet thanks. Tomas always said you were the steady one. Back in the office, the tide turned. Carver's phone buzzed with escalations, higher-ups alerted by the growing spectacle, whispers of media sniffing around the biker blockade turned guardian tale. He relented, fingers tapping approvals into the system, the screen's glow reflecting his defeat. Provisional coverage granted. Full review in 48 hours. Victor nodded once, no triumph in it, just the satisfaction of justice carved from stone. As they filed out, the hallway lights flickered on, dusk settling like a blanket over the building. Night fell softly, stars pricking the sky above the lot where engines idled in low vigil. Isabel's room glowed warmer now, her laughter faint but real as Elena read a story, the pages turning like pages of a life reclaimed. Victor mounted his Indian chief, the familiar vibration grounding him, but he didn't ride alone. The Vipers formed up loosely, headlights piercing the dark, a promise extended beyond one night. Corruption had cracked, but the fight echoed on, loyalty's roar against the silence of neglect. In this chosen kin, redemption wasn't a destination. It was the endless road they traveled together. Engines singing of honor unbroken. If this chapter moved you, smash that like button. It helps spread these stories of quiet heroes to more hearts in need. The moon hung low over Mercy General, its silver light pooling on the hoods of the motorcycles, lined like faithful hounds in the parking lot. The night air had cooled, carrying the crisp bite of autumn leaves from the nearby park, mingling with the lingering warmth of cooling engines. Victor Lang sat on the low retaining wall, his boots planted firm on the cracked concrete. A thermos of black coffee passed hand to hand among the riders. The provisional win against the insurance claim felt like a skirmish victory, solid but not the war. Carver's retreat had bought time, but whispers from Lena's contacts hinted at deeper rot. Executives circling to reverse the decision, pulling strings in boardrooms far from the bedside struggles. Inside, Elena Ramirez moved through Isabel's room with the quiet grace of a survivor, adjusting the blanket over her daughter's sleeping form. The girl's breaths came even now, a soft rhythm that chased away the shadows of the ER's frantic beeps. But Elena's mind raced, fragments of the day replaying like a looped reel. The donor's arm extended under the OR lights, Victor's steady gaze across the lot, the improbable thunder of engines that had bridged her isolation. Tomas's absence ached sharper tonight, not as a void, but as a call to action. She'd buried her fight under grief, working double shifts to keep the lights on. But the Viper's arrival had unearthed it, a reminder that promises didn't die with the promiser. Victor rose as the sliding doors hissed open, Maria stepping out with a nod. Her scrubs were fresh now, changed after a quick nap in the staff lounge, but the tattoo on her wrist peeked from the sleeve, wings etched in memory of wings clipped too soon. Isabel's fever broke, she said, voice low to not disturb the night. But Harlan wants scans tomorrow, could be nothing or... She trailed off, the unspoken weight of or more hanging like exhaust in still air. Victor's jaw tightened, the scar there pulling like a taut wire. He'd lost his brother to a crash that doctors had called unavoidable complications, a phrase that masked the truth of faulty parts and ignored warnings. No more euphemisms for him. The riders gathered closer, a loose semicircle under the sodium lamps. their shadows stretching long across the lot. Jax cracked his knuckles, the sound like gravel shifting, his broad frame a pillar amid the group. Heard from Rico, reporters are sniffing around. One from the local station wants a statement. Murmurs rippled through the circle, a mix of wariness and resolve. The Vipers weren't showmen, their rides were for the road, not the spotlight. But this story, the convoy, the girl, the stand against the suits, carried a moral pull, a chance to shine light on the cracks in the system that devoured families like Eleanor's. Victor shook his head, the motion deliberate. No cameras, not yet. This is about her, not headlines. His voice carried the gravel of command, honed from foxholes and group formations. He thought of Thomas again, the man's laugh cutting through the din of a desert outpost, promising to build a life stateside where loyalty meant more than orders. Victor had ridden away from that, chasing horizons to blur the guilt, but the Vipers had become his tether, a chosen kin pieced from fragments of loss. Rico, young and wired from deployments, leaned against his bike, helmet dangling from the handlebars. What if they twist it, make us look like vigilantes instead of this? He gestured to the lot, the quiet vigil that spoke louder than any roar. Before Victor could respond, his phone buzzed in his pocket, the vibration sharp against his thigh. Lena's name flashed on the screen. He stepped aside, the group's eyes following, tension coiling in the air like a revving idol. "Talk to me," he said, pressing the phone to his ear. Her voice came quick, edged with urgency, the kind that came from late-night digs through digital graves. Carver's boss is pushing back. They're citing irregular escort on the highway as leverage, saying it voids the claim under some emergency protocol. Reyes confirmed it. Troopers are getting heat from above to file reports. Victor's free hand balled into a fist, the leather glove creaking. Corruption's tendrils slithering from desks to badges, threatening to choke the breath they'd fought to give Isabel. He hung up, turning back to the group, the moonlight carving hollows under his eyes. "They're coming for us now, trying to paint the ride as reckless, use it to bury the coverage." A low growl rose from the riders, not anger, but the deep rumble of engines priming for the long haul. Jack spat to the side, his face hardening like forged steel. "Let 'em try. We've got witnesses from here to the county line." Maria crossed her arms, her nurse's pragmatism cutting through. "And we've got Elena. If they drag this out, Isabel's scans, meds, it all stalls." The circle tightened, shoulders brushing, the scent of leather and faint tobacco binding them. This was family, not by birth, but by the scars they shared, the vows that outlasted the grind. Dawn crept in slowly, painting the eastern sky in bruised purples as Victor led a smaller contingent inside. Elena met them in the hallway, her rosary clicking softly in her hand, eyes searching Victor's face. "What's wrong?" she asked, sensing the shift like a mother to her child's unspoken fear. He explained, words measured, the bureaucratic ambush laid bare. Her chin lifted, fire kindling in the weariness. Thomas faced worse in the sand. "We fight it together." For the first time, she stepped into the fray fully, pulling a worn folder from her bag, receipts, letters, a timeline of denials she'd compiled alone. The Vipers absorbed it, a map to the enemy's gates. By mid-morning, the lot swelled again, more bikes arriving like reinforcements in a siege. Hale, the elder mechanic, tinkered with a loose chain on Rico's ride, his hands steady as he shared a tale from his service days, a promise to a dying buddy, carried through decades until it saved a stranger's home from foreclosure. "Honor ain't loud," he grunted, wiping oil on his rag. "It's the quiet that endures." Victor nodded, the words settling like ballast. He radioed Reyes, bridging the gap between badge and brotherhood, the trooper agreeing to testify, his own code aligning against the higher-ups' games. As the sun climbed, casting harsh midday glare across the asphalt, Elena visited Isabel's side while the club mobilized. Lawyers drafted affidavits. Maria liaised with the hospital's ethics board. Jax coordinated a rotating watch to ensure no shadow fell on the family unchecked. Tension hummed, psychological barbs from anonymous calls to Victor's line, threats veiled as advice to back off. But in the face of it, redemption bloomed. Victor confided in Elena over vending machine sandwiches, the scar on his jaw softening as he spoke of his brother's crash, the parallel guilt that had chained him. Tomas gave me a second chance, now we're giving her one. The day wore on, the hospital's corridors echoing with purposeful steps, the air thick with the undercurrent of battle. Isabel woke briefly, her small voice asking for the wheelmen, a spark of wonder in her eyes that lit the room. Outside, engines purred in solidarity, a low symphony against the encroaching dusk. The fight against corruption wasn't over. It coiled tighter, demanding more than speed. But in this chosen circle, loyalty stood unyielding, promises weaving a shield stronger than any storm. Victor mounted up as shadows lengthened, the road ahead not empty but alive with the weight of what they'd protect. For Isabel, for Thomas, for the honor that refused to fade. The tension in Mercy General's administrative wing thickened like oil in a cold engine, the air heavy with the scent of printer ink and stale bureaucracy. Victor Lang stood at the head of a makeshift war room, a cramped conference table cluttered with folders, laptops, and half-empty coffee cups that had gone cold hours ago. The late afternoon sun slanted through half-drawn blinds, striping the faces of the gathered vipers in bars of gold and shadow. Lena, the paralegal with a viper patch faded from years of wear, tapped furiously at her keyboard, her fingers a blur as she cross-referenced claims data against public records. "They're digging in," she muttered, eyes narrowed behind wire-rimmed glasses, "pushing for an audit on the highway escort, claiming it disrupted public safety. If Reyes folds, we're exposed." Victor's gloved hand rested on the table's edge, the leather creaking under pressure, his mind a whirlwind of foxhole instincts. The scar along his jaw throbbed faintly, a phantom echo of old wounds, reminding him how promises could turn to chains if not guarded fiercely. Thomas's vow, look after Elena and the kids, had pulled him from solitude, but now it entangled the whole club in a web spun by suits who viewed lives as line items. Outside, through the window, the parking lot hummed with low conversation, engines ticking as they cooled, riders like Jax and Rico forming a human perimeter against prying eyes. Reporters had multiplied, their vans idling at the curb, cameras trained on the chrome lineup, like vultures circling a fresh kill. Elena Ramirez hovered in the doorway, her rosary beads clicking softly in her fist, the sound a rhythmic counterpoint to the room's urgency. Isabel's scans had come back inconclusive, shadows on the images that could be nothing or the harbinger of deeper trouble, demanding specialist consults that insurance might now deem non-essential. Elena's face, etched with the night's exhaustion, held a quiet steel. She joined the fray fully, her timeline of denials a damning ledger of the system's indifference. "They called me this morning," she said, voice steady but laced with the tremor of held-back fury. "Said the provisional coverage is under review, as if a child's life is a loan to renegotiate." Victor met her gaze, the weight of Tomas's ghost bridging the space between them. "We don't bend. Not to this." The door swung open then, admitting Reyes, the trooper whose cruiser had led the charge through the gridlock. His uniform was crisp, but his eyes carried the weariness of a man caught between oaths, badge versus brotherhood. He removed his hat, running a hand through close-cropped hair, the faint scent of patrol car vinyl clinging to him. "Dispatch is lighting me up," he admitted, dropping into a chair with a sigh that seemed to deflate the room. Captain's got brass breathing down his neck. Insurance lobbies whispering to the commissioner, reckless convoy endangers civilians. They're prepping incident reports to slap fines on the club, maybe even impound bikes. Murmurs rose like exhaust fumes, Jax's massive fist thudding softly on the table, Maria's lips pressing into a thin line as she scrolled through ethics board guidelines on her phone. Victor's mind raced, ethical fissures cracking open. The ride had been pure intent, saving Isabel by seconds, but in the cold light of protocols, it could be twisted into chaos. He'd led men into fire before, knowing the cost of hesitation, but this battle was shadows and signatures, not bullets, a dilemma gnawed push harder and risk fracturing alliances like turning Reyes against his own, or pull back and let corruption claim another family. He thought of his brother, the crash that stole him not just from life but from justice, mechanics' warnings ignored, a payout quashed by corporate slight. No more. Reyes, Victor said, voice low and deliberate, leaning forward so the light caught the silver in his beard. You saw it. 200 of us, disciplined as a unit. Clearing a path for blood. Not one wreck, not one soul hurt. You gonna let paper wolves rewrite that? The trooper hesitated, fingers drumming the table, the rhythm echoing the distant pulse of engines outside. His own code warred visibly, loyalty to the thin blue line clashing with the moral clarity of the night. I filed the truth. Priority medical escort, no violations. But if they audit dash cams... He trailed off, the unspoken threat hanging. Lena interjected, sliding a printout across the table. Emails subpoenaed from the insurer's servers, redacted but revealing. Carver's boss directing leverage via traffic authority to bury claims like Elena's. This is it, she said, tapping the page. Pattern of collusion. We go public with this. Quietly, to the right outlets, and the heat flips on them. As dusk bled into the sky, painting the lot in deepening blues, the group mobilized with the precision of a road formation. Maria coordinated with hospital allies, securing pro bono scans for Isabel under a charity waiver, her nursing contacts a shield against delays. Jax and Rico headed out to gather affidavits from drivers on the interstate. Trucker logs, dash cam footage proving the convoy's restraint. Victor walked Elena back to Isabel's room, the corridor's fluorescent hum a stark contrast to the gathering storm. The girl stirred as they entered, her small face lighting at the sight of him. The wheelmen saved me, she whispered, clutching a stuffed bear, her voice a fragile thread of wonder. Eleanor knelt, smoothing her hair, but her eyes met Victor's over the bed, a shared resolve, the promise evolving from protection to defiance. Outside, the riders ignited their bikes in a staggered roar, not to depart but to patrol the perimeter, headlights sweeping like searchlights against encroaching night. Reporters edged closer, microphones thrust forward, but Jax waved them back with a glare that needed no words. Victor joined the circle, the air thick with the aroma of cooling metal and faint rain on the horizon. Rico handed him a burner phone, Lena's latest dig, a whistleblower inside the insurer, ready to confirm the rot if granted anonymity. The psychological toll pressed, sleepless eyes, whispered doubts about escalation, but loyalty bound them tighter, a chosen family facing the abyss. Night fully claimed the sky, stars hidden behind city haze as Victor's radio crackled with Reyes's voice. Standing with you. Reports amended. Truth's my oath. Relief rippled through the group, but the war simmered on, corruption's claws retracting only to strike anew. Eleanor emerged briefly, joining the vigil, her presence a quiet anchor. In the glow of taillights, Victor felt the redemption deepen, not just in saving Isabel, but in forging justice from the fragments of betrayal. The engines idled low, a heartbeat of endurance, promising that dawn would bring the final push. For in this unbreakable circle, honor wasn't yielded. It was the road they claimed, mile by unyielding mile. The first light of dawn crept over the horizon, a pale gold bleeding into the bruised purple of the night sky, illuminating the Mercy General parking lot, where the Iron Viper's motorcycles stood like weathered monuments. The air held a crisp edge, laced with the earthy scent of dew-kissed asphalt and the fading metallic tang of exhaust from the night's vigil. Victor Lang shifted on his bike's seat, the leather creaking under him, his breath visible in faint puffs as the chill nipped at his exposed neck. The burner phone in his pocket felt heavier now, Lena's whistleblower contact a loaded chamber in this shadow war. Around him the riders stirred, Jax cracking his neck with a low grunt, Maria zipping her vest against the morning bite, Rico scanning the lot's edges, where reporter vans lingered like ghosts unwilling to fade. Inside the hospital, the corridors glowed with the soft hum of awakening fluorescence, the scent of fresh linens and brewing coffee wafting from the nurse's station. Elena Ramirez paused at Isabel's door, her hand lingering on the frame, the rosary beads warm from hours of clutching. The girl's room was a sanctuary of quiet triumph, monitors chiming steadily, sunlight filtering through half-open blinds to dance across the stuffed bear clutched in her small arms. Isabel slept deeply, her chest rising in untroubled rhythm, the shadows from the scans now just echoes in the rear view. But Elena's heart twisted with the day's uncertainties, the insurance's clause retracting only to test for weakness, the fear that one more denial could unravel it all. Thomas's photo on the nightstand watched over them, his smile a silent urging to stand firm. Victor's radio crackled to life as the sun crested fully, Reyes's voice cutting through the static like a siren's wail. "It's done. Commissioner pulled the audit. Your convoys cleared, reports sealed as humanitarian aid, the insurers folding under the spotlight." A beat of silence followed, then Reyes added, gruff but genuine, "You were right, Lang. Truth's the only badge that matters." Victor's grip tightened on the handlebars, relief flooding him like cool rain after a desert burn. The psychological siege had broken, not with fists or fury, but with the unyielding weight of testimony. Lena's unearthed emails, affidavits from interstate witnesses, Maria's medical logs painting Isabel's need in stark, human strokes. The whistleblower had tipped the scale, a mid-level exec spilling details of rigged denials over an anonymous line, his conscience cracking under the moral glare of lives like Elena's dangling in the balance. The riders erupted in a subdued roar, engines firing in staggered harmony, a victory lap contained to the lot, throttles twisted just enough to send vibrations rumbling through the ground without waking the sleeping city. Jax dismounted first, pulling Elena into a bear hug as she emerged from the doors, her laughter muffled against his broad chest, tears carving fresh paths down her cheeks. "It's over," Victor said, stepping forward, his voice rough but laced with the lightness of chains shed. He placed a hand on her shoulder, the gesture bridging years of silence, Thomas's promise now a living flame. Full coverage approved. Scans, meds, everything. No more fighting alone. Elena nodded, her eyes shining with a mix of exhaustion and fierce gratitude, the rosary slipping into her pocket, like a relic laid to rest. "You kept his word, all of you." She glanced at the circle of faces, scarred, weathered, bound by invisible threads of loss and loyalty, the chosen family that had turned a desperate ride into an unbreakable legacy. Isabel's voice piped from the doorway then, small but clear, propped up on pillows with a nurse's help. "Mama, are the wheelmen staying?" The group chuckled, the sound warm and rolling like distant thunder, Maria kneeling to ruffle the girl's curls. "As long as you need us, kiddo, we're the road that doesn't end." By mid-morning, the lot transformed into a makeshift celebration, the sun baking the chrome until it gleamed like polished gold. Riders shared thermoses of strong coffee, and stories swapped over tailgates, Jax recounting his son's fleeting rides, the wind's freedom a balm for old wounds, Rico opening up about deployments where brotherhood meant survival, the Vipers echoing that unyielding pull. Victor leaned against his Indian chief, the familiar scent of oil and leather grounding him, as Elena recounted fragments of Thomas's life, their wedding under desert stars, his quiet vows to build something solid. The scar on Victor's jaw caught the light, no longer a mark of failure, but of battles won. Redemption woven into the club's fabric like the patches on their vests. Reporters had been gently turned away, the story leaking organically through social shares and diner whispers, a tale of moral justice rippling outward, without the clubs seeking the glare. Dr. Harlan emerged with charts in hand, his face softened by the outcome. Stable. No complications. She's a miracle. The words hung in the air, a poetic close to the chaos, the hospital's indifferent hum now a backdrop to hope reclaimed. Victor watched Isabel wave from her window, her small hand a beacon, and felt the hollow within fill, not with noise but with the steady thrum of purpose. As noon approached, the convoy prepared to disperse, engines idling in farewell, the air alive with the promise of roads ahead. Victor mounted up last, Elena's embrace lingering a moment longer, her whisper carrying the weight of futures mended. "Thank you for being the family he knew you'd be." He nodded, helmet visor lifting to reveal eyes clear of ghosts, the ride that started in desperation, now a sacred oath etched in motion. The Vipers rolled out in formation, a steel river snaking toward the horizon, leaving Mercy General behind but carrying its lesson forward. In a world of corruption and fleeting ties, loyalty endured, silent actions echoing louder than any storm. The sacrifice of that night, the miles, the risks, the stand against the machine, had forged something eternal, a legacy of honor that no paperwork could erase. For Victor, the open road beckoned not as escape, but as continuation. The brotherhood his anchor in the endless ride. Thank you for riding with us through this tale of promises kept and families forged. If stories like Victor's and the Iron Vipers move you, hit that subscribe button. We'll keep sharing these journeys of quiet courage, one chapter at a time.